Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. This video we're talking about Aquarius season 2023, the first new astrological season of our new year here in 2023. But of course, for those of us who use the astrological clock as our main calendar, of course, this is one of the last phases of the solar year, right? Aquarius is the 11th of the 12th sign, so we're actually moving towards the end of the solar year, the end of the astrological cycle, even though we're at the very beginning of our new calendar year. So we'll talk about it. Of course, as usual, we'll pull up the chart and we'll take a look at some of the significant transits coming our way, the astrological weather for the month. But before I jump into that, I just want to talk about a few themes in general. And as I was writing about this Aquarius season this morning, I always usually write an article before I record my video. It's just a different modality. I feel like when I'm writing, I kind of get possessed by what I think is my daemon. It kind of takes over this planetary influence, which for me I believe is Jupiter, who works through me in mysterious ways. And often, draws my mind and my attention to like the really big picture kind of stuff, which I think is why I'm always really interested in the collective and the global transits, what's going on in the world. It's part of my fascination. It's part of how I orient to the world. And so as I was writing the article this morning, I was really reflecting on this 0 degrees Aries point. Of course, that's when we're looking at this, yesterday actually, on January 20th, the sun moved into 0 degrees Aquarius. And as I was just looking at the chart and just thinking about that degree, and I was having a conversation with a colleague about it yesterday, and I've just been reflecting on the importance of this kind of gate, this kind of window that we're moving through. And in fact, I titled the article, something about the Stargate. We're moving through this metaphor of a Stargate. And it feels very much like that. I've been talking a lot. If you followed this channel for the last couple of years, a lot of the energy we've been working through has been this shift from Capricorn to Aquarius. Just about everything we've been talking about since 2020, with that massive stellium in Capricorn, and then with the great mutation, right, the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn at 0 degrees Aquarius on the winter solstice of 2020, I really believe was the ignition key to the Aquarian age, or at least an Aquarian era. We have just entered a 200-year period where we are moving from the earth element, which has been all about materialism, right? The rise of capitalism around the world really took place under the cycle of Earth. And here, with this initiation starting in 2020, we have moved into a 200-year period of the element air. So rather than the materialism Earth, it's about the ideas of air, communication, right? It's a much more mentally focused era that we're moving in. And Aquarius has set the theme for this period. And we are experiencing a lot of Aquarian energy under this signature. And when we look at that as a gate of transition, one of the things that's interesting in considering also this shift from Capricorn into Aquarius is that these are both signs traditionally ruled by Saturn. And so Saturn figures prominently into this era that we're in. And we've talked a lot about it. Obviously, its conjunction with Pluto back in March of 2020 was, I think, for a lot of us, we could see as astrologers, that was the initiation of the coronavirus and the pandemic, which is a very perfect signature for any conjunction of Pluto and Saturn. It often is a very difficult, challenging, limiting, transformational period. And this has been all of those things in spades in a lot of ways. So as we're considering the sun moving into Aquarius this season, right, and this will be the last time we have, well, is that true? I don't know. I'd have to check. But we're coming into an era where, going forward, Pluto will also be in Aquarius. Okay, I'm not sure if by in Aquarius season 2024, if it hadn't retrograded back or not, but I believe it will have. Regardless, we're coming to the end of an era, right? We're coming to the end of the Pluto and Capricorn era. As I said in my video on 2023, this is going to be the sort of the crowning of a new era. We're going to be kind of partially born into this Pluto and Aquarius era, which is going to last for the better part of 19 years. And so Aquarius season, the Aquarius era, the great mutation in Aquarius, the age of Aquarius, which brings in a whole other sort of precessional clock, which is a 2,000-year period. Whether it started and where it started is the subject of much speculation within the astrological community, within the greater spiritual community. But I think we can have no doubt that we are in it. We are in it, fully in it, and we are moving into it rather quickly. This time that's opening up for us is a time of great acceleration. And so one of the other things I've been exploring of late, and I'm planning on integrating a few new modalities along with astrology as I'm sort of evolving the channel over the coming year. One of the things that I've been exploring deeply of late is the subject of human design, which is a really interesting, very modern modality, which is an attempt to synthesize the traditional zodiac of the astrology, along with the I Ching and the 64 hexagrams of the Chinese divination system, along with the Vedic chakra systems, along with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. So it's a really interesting synthesis that provides us just yet another lens through which to understand and observe ourselves, our relationships, and the unfolding patterns of the world around us. And as I was looking at so what happens is you get a gate. There's 64 gates for each of the hexagram, one gate for each of, and it's synced to 360 degrees of the zodiacal wheel. So I think it comes out to about like 5.625 or something degrees. It's not a perfect match. 64 and 360 don't divide equally, which is a very almost disturbing thing for those of us who love the beautiful symmetry of astrology with its 12 signs and 360 degrees and 30-degree increment aspects, right? There's a lot of beautiful symmetry, the 4 elements and the 3 modes and all of those, very, very prime number kind of integrations. Whereas the 64 doesn't divide equally. 360 doesn't divide by 64 into whole numbers. So what happens with this map, and let me just put up let me share my screen so you can see this. Now this is the sort of integration of what you can see here is the traditional wheel of the zodiac on the inside, with all the 12 signs, and then there's a wheel of the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching outside of that. And then the interior here is what's known as the body graph, and this has a 9-centered chakra system, an evolution of the traditional 7 centers of the Vedic chakras. And then there's all these channels and paths, which is an integration of the Kabbalah Tree of Life with its, I believe, 32 channels. Really fascinating. This was sort of kind of channeled, if you will, by a guy named Ra Uru Hu back in 1987. He had an experience which was 8 days and nights of this kind of download of this information. And I've been sort of just kind of cracking the code of it a little bit, and it's a really fascinating system that has captured my imagination. But one thing that's interesting, as I said, if you lay out these hexagrams, what happens is you don't get an equal distribution. And so while some of the hexagrams or gates will be entirely within one sign, say here gate 54 is in these middle degrees of Capricorn, some of them fall over the transition between two signs, including this here, this 60th gate, which is where we are now, because I was curious, where does 0 degrees Aquarius fall? Because this seems to be a really sensitive point in our transition time that we're living through. And it's, okay, gate 60, which is both Capricorn and Aquarius. And if I pull up here, they have a cool little interface that you can use. Here's gate 60, and I have up here the date for the movement into Aquarius here. It's a 60.5, and I'll just show you what that means real quick. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about it is this notion of leadership, right? And just read this quote from you, which I think is fascinating. The awareness that the destruction of the old limitations simply creates new ones. This results in behavioral patterns that demonstrate this understanding through actions and enhances leadership potential, the energy to handle a lifelong process of dealing with limitations. I thought that was interesting because Saturn is all about limitations, right? And here we have a gate whose theme is limitation. It's also about the acceptance of limits. And I think it's really profound that this idea is that the limitations of the old system, although we sort of evolve past them, we have to then accept the limitations of the new system we're moving into. So we're moving past the limitations of Capricorn, and now we're about to encounter the limitations of Aquarius, which I think is a really, really profound thing to meditate on as we're moving into this new era and this new phase, because I think a lot of us have this feeling and sense of the liberation of Aquarius, that we are going, and in modern terms, being ruled by Uranus, right? It's the freedom from the known, freedom from Saturn. It breaks the limits. It's future-oriented. It's progressive, right? It's revolutionary. It's sudden genius energy, all the things that we associate with Aquarius by virtue of it being co-ruled by the modern planet of Uranus. But traditionally, Aquarius was ruled by Saturn and still is co-ruled by Saturn. And it, I think, adds to the sort of complexity of Aquarius as a sign. I think it's one of the more difficult of the 12 signs of the zodiac to really wrap your brain around, because it does have somewhat of this paradoxical quality to it. And I think being co-ruled by Saturn and Uranus, right, these nearly antithetical forces, where Saturn is all about limits and the borders and saying no. Uranus is no limits, and it's blowing away Saturn's boundaries and saying yes. And this tension is, it seems deeply encoded into the Aquarius archetype, which is, it's difficult, right? Nothing makes sense about Aquarius, right? Its symbol is the water bearer, right? But it's not a water sign, it's an air sign, right? And it confuses a lot of people. They're like, no, Aquarius is water. No, Aquarius is air, right? And it's fixed air, right? It's the fixed air sign. So it can be very, very rigid. It can be very narrow in its thinking. So it's at one time progressive and future-oriented and scientific and technological, that it can be very dogmatic and narrow-minded and have sort of blinders on, right? It's like, yes, I'm in search of the truth, but there's only one truth. It's my truth, right? And we see this a lot in our modern world of specialization. We've been very specialized, where everyone has very unique technical skills. Our education has geared us to become specialists, right? This is a result of the industrial age. This is a very Capricorn thing, as a matter of fact. It's the assembly line process. Everyone does their one particular job well, and the whole car or whatever is going through the assembly line comes out in the end. And so we have highly specialized scientists and technicians, right? But they're all in their own sort of ivory towers, in their own labs, doing their very specific work. And there's not a lot of communication between these special areas of interest. So we've had this period of, about a century of just incredible innovation and specialization, but no integration, right? And I think a lot of the crises that we're experiencing right now with all the systems of the world, Capricorn, is a result of that lack of communication between the specialists. So I think part of the era that we're moving into, this Aquarian age, is about this reintegration, right? It's about more of, the idea of the Renaissance man or woman, or I love the term, the polymath, right? These individuals who are really skilled in a lot of different areas, right? And the shadow side of that, of course, is the jack of all trades, master of none. And I think we're entering an era where we're called to a versatility of mastery. That's a very apt way of putting it, and a greater integration, because the future of society, of civilization, really depends upon that. So as I'm meditating on this 60th gate, this gate of limitation and the recognition of that, right, and this idea of leadership, it really struck me as very powerful and profound. It's like, okay, well, who are these new leaders? And it occurred to me as I was writing this morning, I was like, well, we are the new leaders. It's any and all of us who feel compelled to act in some way in these very dynamic, challenging, transitory times that we're living through. And so we are all the leaders of the new world that is unfolding as we're moving through it. So that's kind of just a long-winded introduction to Aquarius season, but just kind of sharing what I'm musing upon, and maybe you're feeling the same. But let's now move on. I'll go back and share my screen here. Just before we bring up the chart, just a quick reminder, I am taking bookings for readings. I've got the calendar open now through the end of February. I'll be taking March off. I'll be traveling during the month of March, but I'll be back in the spring. So always a good time, the new year, to get a reading. Blueprint to the Soul is probably the best reading that I offer. And I have a bunch of others, so check out astrolab21.com, my website. If you're into reading articles, of course, I do publish on Medium. It is behind a paywall, but I love Medium. I think it's a great site for bloggers and writers of all sorts. There's the article I published this morning, Entering the Stargate. But I do all my monthly reports there. I do a lot of more in-depth, I do probably 3 or 4 really in-depth series over the course of every year, 2023 stuff. Anyway, that's that. Let's jump to the charts. Let's get to the stuff I think hopefully you're all tuned in for, right? So here we are bringing up the chart for this 0-degree Aries point, the sun moving in to Aquarius. Actually happened yesterday, January 20th, about 3:30 in the morning here on the East Coast. And so what's going on? What's our astrological weather, right? And it's always interesting just to look at the chart for that moment of ingress, right? Because it does kind of set the theme and the tone for the entire month that's going to unfold as we move through this 11th phase of the solar season. A couple of things to talk about. We did talk about this last month, but Jupiter now 3 degrees moving into Aries. We actually have all the planets moving forward except Uranus, which will turn direct I think later this month. We've got Mars finally moving direct in Gemini after its very long retrograde period. Those of you who have any prominent placements in Gemini, Sun, Moon, or Rising in particular, have probably been feeling this Mars retrograde more than most, and maybe feeling a sense of moving forward. We had a Mercury retrograde to start the new year. That has since stationed and turned direct, and we actually get Mercury and the Moon together in Capricorn at 8 degrees here, actually forming a very interesting pattern here with this Mars that we just mentioned in Gemini. As we see, we start with a yod between that Mercury and Moon and Cap and that South Node in Scorpio. So that could be an interesting welcome back to Mars as it's trying to move forward all of the retrograde energy in our mental world, our communication style within our families and with our siblings, all those things that Gemini tends to represent with Mars there, right? It was retrograde for quite a period, so a lot of difficulty and challenges to the energy trying to move through that archetype of Gemini. Now we've gotten moving forward, but it's kind of meeting some resistance here as it's trying to integrate these two. It's at a very sensitive point between these two positions of Capricorn and Scorpio here. So we've got an air sign or a planet in an air sign trying to reconcile Earth and water. Tricky. So that could give us a little frustration, just as we feel like we're getting get back in gear. We've been in reverse here for a few months, and now we're in first gear, trying to shift into second, and boom, we hit some resistance. Where's that coming from? Well, it's coming from the emotional place, like this idea with this Moon Mercury conjunction, like expressing ourselves verbally and emotionally in a very practical way, Capricorn. This could be languaging and feelings within the dynamics of parents and children, within worker and boss, any of these hierarchical relationships. It could be tricky, just as we're starting this Aquarius season and trying to integrate some very deep emotional karma from the past with that South Node in Scorpio. So something to be sensitive to as we launch into this new season. But as we've had a lot here in recent months, we're beginning with very quickly, let me just get the hour here. Today, as a matter of fact, even get it to the minute here. Why not? At 1 degree 32 minutes of Aquarius, by my reckoning, that'll be today at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, is officially the Aquarius new moon. So we've got the sun and moon together here, initiating this cycle. Just again, we talk about that we're still in this gate 60, the gate of limitations. And something else interesting, if you look at the bounds, if you will, or the Egyptian terms or bounds, I think this is very telling that, traditionally, as we know, Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. And then if you look at the Egyptian bounds, it divides each sign into 5 sub phases, which are each ruled by one of the 5 traditional planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And what you get is Saturn rules the last phase of Capricorn along with the first phase of Aquarius. So this is why this is such a Saturnian gate in so many ways. It only happens at the other end of the zodiac here. The same thing happens at the end of Cancer and the beginning of Leo. And those two gates have a profound symmetry, right? We're moving from 2 cardinal signs into 2 fixed signs. But this is something to, I think, be aware of. And I think we're being called to really integrate the Saturnian side of Aquarius. And it's kind of there's a bit of a grounding energy to it. I mean, anytime we're dealing with Saturn and Mars for that matter, it's always, for better or for worse, right? And hopefully for the better, because, Saturn is an energy, an archetype that is really interested in building things of value, of foundation, of that structure that it wants to create. It's because anything on this earth plane, in this dimension that we're in, requires structure. You know, you can't build anything without Saturn. You can have all the great ideas of Aquarius, all the genius of Uranus, but unless it can get substantiated, downloaded into the form that is Saturn, nothing happens. All the great ideas are just that until they are concretized in form. Saturn. So, it's kind of, I think, a theme of this new moon, particularly as we still have Saturn. Our buddy Saturn is still in the later degrees of Aquarius under this configuration. So this is really a lot of Aquarius energy during this period. We've got Venus, I think the next day will be exactly conjunct with Saturn at 24 degrees here. That's going to be an interesting energy for us to integrate as well. Always a little difficult, I think, to have Venus conjoin Saturn. It's, this limit and restriction, sometimes a sense of suffering and loss in the areas of Venus, in the areas of our desire nature, our pleasure seeking, what we love, right? So limits, there's a limit to your love. What was that great song? The artist is escaping me right now, but that song just popped into my head as I said that. There's a limit to your love. There's a limit to love. Whenever Saturn and Venus get together in the sky, it's about limits. It's about structures. It's about responsibility, right? So there's a responsibility, Saturn, to what we value. Venus, right? Because that's heart. That's really what Venus is about, is value. What do we have? What do we value? What do we hold dear, right? Which is why it refers to oftentimes things of money and resources, right? Because whatever we value is what we spend our money on. We value enough to buy it, right? So consider that, those two archetypes combining here in Aquarius, right? How can we structure our values, our relationships, our desire nature in a way that is aligned with this sense of responsibility, this sense of commitment to the greater good, right? Aquarius is always drawing us into the good of the people, the good of the collective over the interests of the individual, right? The opposite sign of Leo, which is all about the self and self-empowered, self-generated creativity. That opposite, Aquarius, is about what's good for the group, what's good for the tribe, what's good for the collective, the community, the entire planet, right? So, this is an interesting, you could extrapolate this to the biggest picture, like what are the values that respects the limits of our resources, that is aligned with being one of 8 billion people on this planet. So that's something to reflect on as individuals, something to be aware of in the collective. Often these kinds of themes just tend to show up in the world, and you'll see something in the news about this kind of theme coalescing in a very archetypal way that becomes very concrete. So that's an interesting thing to consider as we move through the rest of this month. Now, as I said in my my 2023 preview, it's not that any month is uneventful, but in comparison to recent months and years, like the past 24 to 36 months, this is a period of relatively, it's relatively quiet, relatively calm weather, astrologically speaking. we are going to get this Mercury is now going to start moving a little quicker after its retrograde. As it moves through Capricorn and gains speed. It will run into its conjunction here with Pluto before the month's out. Let's just jump ahead and have a look at that. Before we get to that, though, we should say we've got Venus ingressing into Pisces, which is a nice, will be a much nicer month with the start of that. Remember, Pisces, Venus is exalted in Pisces, so this is a real boost to, after having that conjunction with Saturn, we get those limits and restrictions put on us as it starts to separate from Saturn and move through Pisces on its way to a conjunction with Uranus, right? So it's an interesting time of Venus moving between these two outer planets. So it gets this contact with Saturn, sort of which can be valuable, right? As we can combine those two signs and those two planetary archetypes in a positive way, as Venus then comes into Pisces and gets this incredible depth, right? It's like the immersion, it's like just dropping yourself into the ocean or into a beautiful pool, right? Or, just like that feeling of letting go, or you can just kind of strip yourself naked and drop into water, into a beautiful, perfect bath. That's the feeling of Venus moving into Pisces. So this is a very fertile time, very creative, imaginative, right? And if anyone who is in any creative art, music, poetry, film, right? Any really artistic endeavor, our sense of the Venusian, of the creative, of the expressive, of the erotic, right? Eros, that sense of what we love to do and how we love to do it and who we love to be when we're really doing the things we love together. It takes a sense of, or a sense of community here, right? Pisces, the collective, doing things collaboratively with others. Kind of just a delicious month or so during this transit when we get to just really explore our creative side and let go, right? And trust, right? Pisces calls us to let go and let God. It's one of my favorite phrases when I think about the archetype of Pisces. It's just a beautiful way of thinking about that, and whatever God means to you, whether it's the source, or whether it's whatever your modality is that connects you to the great, the cosmos, really. Good time to get in touch with that. So any rituals that involve connecting you in that way will be quite enjoyable over the next few weeks. So we're going to get that transit continuing. I was going to move forward here because I feel like this conjunction, as I just went past it, it's going to be at about 28 degrees. So sometime on February 10th, what we're seeing here is this conjunction of Mercury and Pluto will be really interesting because we're really ending this period, and I think I wrote about it and talked about it back in Capricorn season last month, this whole unfinished Capricorn business, and we're really going to be dealing with that for the next 18 months, right? Because we talk about Pluto is about to do this little do-si-do across this very sensitive gate, right? This gate 60, between the ending degrees of Capricorn, the beginning degree of Aquarius. It's going to come in, it's going to retrograde, it's going to come in, it's going to retrograde. It's literally a year and a half dance on this very sensitive threshold, this transition gate between, I really feel like, the old world and the new world. And we are going to feel this back and forth, this push and pull. And so this will be an interesting sort of microcosm, I think, of that entire period that we're moving into. And as Mercury comes around and conjoins with Pluto, it tends to really, our minds are going to be quite preoccupied with perhaps a lot of our own personal unfinished Capricorn business. As you look back on the past 14 plus years, since 2008, when Pluto moved through Capricorn, what has it been challenging you to restructure in your life? What are the old paradigms that just don't serve you anymore, right? This is something that all of us are being challenged with individually. This is something that is playing out on a collective global scale right now. And so we're all being forced to really consider what that is. How are we transforming Pluto? How are we metamorphosizing the very structure of our lives? And really important to know, where is Capricorn in your chart? Where is this transition from Capricorn to Aquarius happening for you? Like, I'm very aware that this is a movement from my second to my third house. This whole period of Pluto in Capricorn has been all about me restructuring my material well-being, my resources. Where does my money come from? What do I value? What do I want to use that capacity to earn to spend on, right? And now it's about to move into my third house, Aquarius. Ideas, information, sharing, and learning, right? It's a whole new period. But I understand for myself, I need to get my second house Capricorn business locked down. And I am in the process of transforming how I do that. And so this is happening for every one of us. So I really, if you know your chart, where is it? Where is this Capricorn Aquarius threshold in your life? What two houses is it moving you into? And so wherever this is for you, you're going to be kind of maybe mentally consumed by that for a few days. This can be challenging. Anytime a planet hits Pluto, it's a heavy period in that planetary cycle. It gets dragged down into the underworld, right? It's like, this is a really cool mythical metaphor, because if any planet can handle this kind of transit, though, it is Mercury, because Mercury is the psychopomp. Mercury is the guiding mythical guide of souls into the underworld. Mercury can go between worlds. Mercury gets to go down into the Hades, into the realm of Pluto, and come back, right? So this is kind of a great period for those kinds of transformational rituals. Any of you who are into the depth of experience of, say, a psychedelic experience, things of that nature, right? Really profound time to restructure your mental framework, Mercury, as it goes through Pluto and Capricorn. So that's coming up here in, February 10th, sort of the middle of the month. And then we have a couple other big conjunctions. It's all about conjunctions. And you can see what's lining up here, right? As Mercury comes into Pluto conjunction, the Sun is going to move into its conjunction with Saturn. Venus is moving into her conjunction with Neptune. And we have Jupiter moving towards a conjunction with Chiron. The only one, Mars kind of on his own, working as a loner, as he will be for most of this year. It's another one. This happened, I think, in 2020, where Mars just kind of got out. I think it's 2021, actually. Mars got out ahead of everyone and was opposing all of the planets. Obviously, the Sun and the inner planets will catch up to Mars sometime in the summer. But for a while, Mars is kind of on his own, very independent, which suits him in independent and freedom-loving Gemini. So this, again, I feel like there's not a lot of tension. There's not a lot of squares or oppositions taking place as we move through Aquarius season. So, like I said, enjoy it. Enjoy the good astrological weather while it lasts. But, some of these conjunctions can create some transformation. It's a shift, right? And I think it's preparing us for what's to come in March, April, May, when things do get a little more, the weather gets a little more intense, let's just say that. So we're seeing all of these conjunctions coming exact. So we'll get the Venus-Neptune conjunction on the 15th of February. Again, that's just, whatever's happening from the time Venus comes into Pisces up until that conjunction, well, this will sort of culminate. And you talk about a period of incredibly fertile creativity. Again, this is an artist's dream, right? And we all are artists. The art of living, the art of your own life, life as art, all of these themes, we all get to take part of that signature, to drink from that overflowing cup of creativity, right? Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't always point out the shadow side potential to every one of these configurations. This is a signature as well of just overindulgence, too much of a good thing, right? This is a very hedonic, pleasure-seeking type of signature. You can literally get lost in this kind of configuration, right? Pisces, the water's just going off the deep end, literally drowning in alcohol, literally drowning in drugs. This is a signature of an overdose. So a lot of people who have those kind of tendencies can really go overboard because there's just not enough. It's like, think about, this is like making love to God, Venus, Neptune, like this complete surrender. And for those of us who have, strong spiritual path, like, wow, like that spiritual practice is going to you're just going to be glowing. If you do a yoga practice or a meditative practice, you may feel like you're literally levitating. But if you're the kind of person who gets their spirituality through spirits, which is a false spirituality, that's why it's called spirits, that sense of wanting to taste or touch or kiss the face of God through drugs and alcohol, be careful. Be very careful. Just a caveat. It's just what the stars. It's what these cycles are telling us. So around the same day, with the next day, we got the 15th, 16th. Now we've got Sun conjuncting Saturn in Aquarius, and this is a difficult one. Why? Why would this be difficult? Because here the Sun, which we should say, it's not its favorite part of the sky to go through in its annual cycle. Why? Well, because the Sun loves to be in Leo. That's its home. That's its domicile. So when it's transiting the opposite sign of Aquarius, it is far from home. It is in exile, as we like to say, right? It's in its detriment. So by meeting up with good old Saturn here in a place that it's not super comfortable, this is just a place where we're all going to feel our own sense of our individuality, our purpose, our drive in life may meet some heavy-duty resistance from authorities, from systems and structures, from the government, from the boss, from the corporation, from the school, whatever, right? Now, a potential integration point as well. Again, Saturn is always willing to bring us lessons if we're willing to do the work. So what are the things that we want to change? What is the new structure? Aquarius, there is the opportunity to build something new. Saturn in Aquarius. And this is the last time we'll get this conjunction in this sign for another 28 years. Saturn's going to move on into Pisces. So whatever you've been building towards in this Saturn period, this past 2.5 years, that is innovative, that is progressive, that is rebellious, that is revolutionary, that is genius, right? This is a time to really focus your light and energy on that. And it won't be easy. You will get setbacks. You will have difficulties. You're going to have to work through them if you want the reward. If you want Saturn to give you the blessing, you have to pay your tithe to the old taskmaster. So that's something to keep in mind. But that really takes us through most of this month here. By the 19th, we're into Pisces season, and we're going to get another very early degree new moon in Pisces. It will be conjunct Saturn, so we'll be looking at that. But yeah, for now, that's kind of the astrological weather report for Aquarius season 2023. So some cool big picture things to look at with this transitional gate we're moving through, but also a relatively calm month for us in terms of the transits. So a good time for a lot of integration, a lot of delicious Venusian energy flowing through us, a lot of creativity, a lot of focus on relational energy, just a time to live, life as art, and the art of living would be my strongest suggestion to everyone this month. So hopefully that helps you set your calendar for the year, for the month. Again, if you find this video interesting, helpful, insightful, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, would love if you would subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you know when these reports come out. I will be doing a lot more, I hope to anyway, in this year of 2023. Every year I'm trying to grow the channel and do more. I plan on launching another series this year, which I'm calling Mutable Fire. It's a chance for me to do something to integrate some of these different modalities, right? I will continue to do the Astrolab reports, but I want to do something that's a little more personal and interactive. I plan on having some interviews with some other colleagues over the course of this year, integrating different modalities. So look out for that. Mutable Fire should be coming maybe in the springtime, maybe around the spring equinox is my intention to launch that. So lots to look forward to over the coming year. So I hope you'll join us for that. All right, until next time, everyone. Salam.